Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Lauren and today I am going to show you what's inside my sewing boxes. This was the very first sewing box that I received as a gift along with my sewing machine when I was in my early 20s, I think. And that one served me really well over the years. It's just that now these little side flap things easily open up, and so if it's a heavy box, see what I mean? If I lift it, it'll kind of fall apart. There's been many times where I've dropped it and everything just falls out of the box. They still work, like these little clips, but you just really have to push them hard as well. So it just started to not really function properly for me. I actually got this one a couple of years ago. My mum bought it for me and I was super grateful. So the two of us had a day at Spotlight, or not a day, but spent a couple of hours at Spotlight, and she chose this box for herself and I chose this box for me. And she stocked it with a few different things from Spotlight, which we'll go through. And I was lucky enough to inherit this from my mother after she passed away. I'll talk a little bit more about what's inside my main sewing boxes today, and also talk about the main tools that I use. So yes, I have many sewing boxes here filled with random bits and pieces, but I actually don't use all of it. So I just wanted to kind of list a few items that are kind of must-haves even in your sewing box if you're just starting out, and the things that I always use just for fuss-free sewing. My background here is a little bit boring because this room is for sewing, but it's also for guests. So I don't really want to like put all my craft supplies everywhere and have like stashes of like a stash of fabric on display. Ideally, I would love that, like to have my own space, but this room is kind of multi-purpose at this point. So yeah, but I'm thinking maybe I should put something on the wall, maybe like a patchwork display or something. Yeah, I could sew that with you. But for now, I'm going to start with the first box, which is my oldest sewing box. I can still use it. I have some things in here that I don't really need access to very often. Things like wooden beads and macrame rings and things, because I went through a phase of doing a lot of macrame plant hangers and different projects. Also, there's like a few little buttons and things, so let's just open up and have a look. So this is like a little purse that I made a long time ago. I've made so many of these now that they've actually really come in handy. I just store bits and pieces in them. So in here I've got some, this actually belongs to my mum, and there are some buttons that it looks like it was like a lolly tin. And then yeah, she's just put buttons in here. So I inherited that from my mum. This was actually given to me by my grandmother. It was in her sewing kit, and she believes that these things were in her mother's kit. And if you look closely, it says Woolworths, which is a shop here in Australia, a grocery store. It says Woolworths, but it's like in a vintage look. So that's quite interesting. They're snap fasteners. So I think that's pretty cool. I don't know how old they are, but they look quality, you know. It's not like, you know, those cheap things that we get now, like maybe from Amazon or Temu or something. It just looks quality, and it says made in England. So I think that's pretty cool. I will use them one day. I haven't really had a lot of experience with snap fasteners, but they're in my stash for a rainy day. Then I've got like some elastic that I would use for different projects. And then a whole bunch of wooden beads that I've been using for macrame. So not really sewing related. Some things are. In this little purse, I have some little clips for sewing, and I also have more buttons. Yeah, and just like spare needles for the sewing machine. I'm really bad. I don't actually change my needles very often unless it starts to look a bit wonky, then I'll change it. But I do have these on hand, so it also depends on what fabric you're using, I think, but I'm not an expert when it comes to that. I just use a standard needle, and it's always the same for most things that I make. That's pretty much it for my oldest sewing box. This is the sewing box that I inherited from my mum. So she collected a few different things. She has some pins, which I'll go to when my pins start to become blunt, and I'll jump in here and grab her pins. Same with the needles. She bought like a little tape measure as well, so that means I have 4 of these. It also retracts, which is cute. Some dressmaker's chalk, which I do use sometimes. It's just that lately I'm preferring the air erasable pen. There's like a million thimbles in here. She bought a special one for herself, which is ceramic, I think. But I've literally never used a thimble. Like, I put it on my finger and then it's just awkward and I don't know. Never used it. So I have 5. If you want one, call me. Some fancy needles. I think this one would come in handy if I was doing like a certain kind of stitch where a straight needle might be awkward to get through. And then this one here, I'm not quite sure, but it's got like a flat point and like a very large like hole there to get thread through. She's got a few different threads in here, just basic black and grey, a knitting needle and another little crochet hook. And she's got a little tin, it's got safety pins inside. These look really, really good quality, unlike the ones that I have. So that's good. I also keep like my little purse that's filled with the bits and pieces that come with the Brother machine. Buttonhole maker, some spare needles and some different feet that I've actually never used. So my sewing doesn't go too far beyond a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch and maybe inserting a zipper and doing a buttonhole. So those are my skills. But yeah, so I'm not quite sure what I would use this for, but if I want to figure it out one day, I will. Just different pieces that come with the machine. I just keep those in here. So things that I'm not using often, I put them in this box or I put them in my older sewing box. Mum stored a whole bunch of ribbons in a plastic bag that she thought she might need, maybe for gifts or something. This was my little, it's called a knitting Nancy. So this was mine when I was a little girl. Yeah, I used to knit and then it would come through the bottom. I haven't done that since, I don't know, I was maybe 8 or 9, so I don't actually remember how to use it. I have to YouTube that, but it's cute and I'm glad that she kept it. So now I have that. She's got a whole bunch of bobbins in here, which will come in handy. Then this medicine bottle. The reason I know it's a medicine bottle is because when I was a kid and I'd go through my mum's sewing kit, I'd open up this bottle filled with buttons and there would be this sweet smell that would come through the bottle. And it still smells sweet. Mum had this since maybe I was 5, like a really, really long time. And it was always in my mum's sewing kit. And yeah, I just always knew when I was looking for a button, I'd come in here and then I'd smell it. And it smells like this sweet medicine smell. Still does. So I've inherited that. And then she got this little simplicity purse as well. So most things are matching and she's just got some extra threads in here. That's basically it. She's just stored like ribbons and odds and ends in here. When I need something, I know where it is. So it's handy having this box just to store extra things, and then I can keep my main sewing box for the things that I use most of the time, and it just makes me feel a little bit more organized. This is my main sewing box and I've had it for a couple of years and I put most of my stuff in here, the things that I use. So I try to keep it tidy and organized, but it can easily turn into a mess. What I've got in here is some needles, fabric pens. I have some little trimming scissors and several of these unpickers. What do you call them? A seam ripper, that's what it's called. So yeah, I have several of these seam rippers hanging about. I have another little thread trimmer, bare blades for my rotary cutter, a pair of tweezers in here. It does come in handy like if I'm trying to get the thread through the needle, or you know, just pinching small little things that my fingers can't pinch every now and then. So having tweezers in my kit comes in handy. I came across these clips like when I was making my wedding dress and I bought a whole bunch, and they are way better than pins. And I still use pins sometimes, like when I'm pinning fabric pieces together, but these really do come in handy. They're super easy to take off, put on. They don't kind of make the fabric wonky. Sometimes if you put a pin in the fabric, it'll look a little bit warped and there might be misalignment with the two pieces that are together. But these clips are super handy and keep everything smooth. Some yarn darners, they're called. I would just say large needles. So this is a zipper foot for the sewing machine. I keep those, the ones that I use the most, I keep those handy. One of these little things that helps you pull the thread through a needle. Has to be a name for it. I have some really good scissors. I have way too many measuring tapes. Don't need this many. There's another one here that you pull out that, and then you push the button and it retracts. That's fun, but I never use it. I only use these. I have a pin cushion that I made. I have 2 of these. I've been keeping one at my sewing machine and one at the ironing board just so that I'm not forever trying to find a pin cushion and needing pins and things like that. Like, it's good just to have a couple scattered around. Cotton here at the bottom. Yeah, I try to keep it simple, make do with what I have. If I were to start my sewing kit again, start from scratch, I would make sure that I had some little thread trimmers. So these come in handy. I also like these. They're also pretty. I would have some needles, of course. I would have a whole bunch of bobbins for the sewing machine because I'm forever needing different colours, and having a lot of these on hand is very handy. Replacement blades for my rotary cutter. These little clips, so instead of pins, sometimes these are better to use. I would also have a seam ripper, or 2 or 3, and a pen to draw on the fabric if I'm like making a pattern or something. This is an air erasable one, so after a few minutes it'll kind of fade away, but you have to be careful not to like iron over it, otherwise then it'll stay and you might need to wash your item after that. But yeah, usually it kind of fades away with air. So this is my rotary cutter, so I would definitely have that. Pinking shears, so they have a little zigzag blade, and that's really good, especially if you don't have an overlock machine. I do have an overlock machine and I use it most of the time, but before I got one I was just using this to finish my seams. It just stops the edges from fraying, and I still use it when I'm making like small items that don't necessarily need me to overlock them. And more scissors. It's handy to have really good scissors, very sharp, only for fabric. A couple of pin cushions, so I just made these and then stuffed them with hobby fill. So I just put a few different scraps together and then made kind of a square, and it was super easy. One of my first sewing projects this one was, and then I made this one when I was living overseas because I needed to kind of start again with my stash, so this was one of the first things that I made. And then yeah, like lots of different coloured threads and things. I tend to stock up more on white and black, and I use those most of the time for most of my projects, unless I'm using like sewing with a specific colour, then I might change and use like a coloured thread, but most of the time I'm using black and white. A ruler would come in handy, and yeah, and like some measuring tape to measure yourself, like especially if you're sewing clothes. For the rotary cutter I also have like a self-healing mat, just so that I can cut on top of it and I'm not going to put any marks anywhere or cut into the floor or the desk. But yeah, those are the basics. Obviously a sewing machine. This is my first sewing machine and I'm using it now, but I've had 3 brother machines. So I had one when I was living in Munich, and then one when I was living in Vienna. All of them have been brother. Some of them were digital, but it works really well and still does the job. I've left my sewing machine in Austria while we're not living there. We're living in Australia, so I don't need extra machines, but also I have a overlocker machine in Austria too, and one here, and I have an Elna one, I'm pretty sure, or maybe I have Singer here and then an Elna. Anyway, those are the brands that I have in overlockers. Yeah, and I just get it out when I need it. I don't keep it out all the time. I'm more likely to use the sewing machine, the regular sewing machine, than my overlocker. That is a short and sweet video of the things that are in my sewing boxes and things that I think are necessary to have if you're starting out on your sewing journey and you trying to get your supplies together. I really think that it's best to keep it as simple as possible and not have so many fancy tools until you know that you really need it. I'm trying my best to not accumulate too much stuff these days unless I need it, and trying to make do with what I have. If there is a tool or something that I know would make me work more efficiently or would help me do a certain kind of technique or task in sewing, then I might consider buying it. But those things that I've showed you, pretty much all I use, and I've been able to make a lot of different things with those tools. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe and comment, share your thoughts, share it with a crafty friend. That would be great. I appreciate you watching. I'll talk to you soon.